This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, what a zchus it is to be at the Kever of Rabbi Yosef, the Avezin, the Kilasenu, the Balaturim, Rabbi Yosef Teomim, the Megadim, who lived from 1727 to 1792. As you could see, it doesn't look like many people have been here lately. And the Megadim was the Rav in Frankfurt, Ador. So right now, this city where we are now is in Poland, but originally it was part of Germany. Now, the Megadim was the son of Rabbi Meir. His father, Rabbi Meir, was his Rabbi, and he learned in the Beis Medrash of the Gvir. He calls the Gvir Rav Daniel Yafa, who he accredits in the Hakdama to the Megadim. Now, he started off in Berlin, and he writes how when he began in Berlin, people would come to him with their cases, and that he was very successful in helping them, but it disturbs his learning, and he didn't have time to learn, so he would feign as if he didn't know, so that people wouldn't ask him the shilas, and this way he was able to continue being involved and immersed in his learning. Now, I want to read to you some of the humble words of the Megadim in his Hakdama. Megadim says about his job of sort of clarifying, we're going to see soon the words of the Shach, the words of the Taz. The Megadim actually first came out with his commentary on the Yeridea, and only afterwards on Even Ezer. So the Megadim says, "V'hinei ein b'malachti zeh kedei iloi v'hatifaros." What he does, he's not really worthy of honor, of praise. He says, "V'ani doime la'ani asher nitein loi reshus me'es hamalachim v'sarim." He says, you know what I'm like? I'm like a poor man who's given permission from the king to walk in the king's courtyards and to be in the association of the princes and the ministers. And this ani has a very great privilege, because when a prince doesn't want a piece of a steak, or when the prince doesn't want a piece of his luxurious food, or a little scrap of the prince's clothing falls off, so the ani could pick it up, and now it looks like the ani has expensive food, expensive clothing. So says the Megadim, so too I. None of my Torah is my own. I'm just picking up the scraps of the Gedolim that lived before me. He says, if you see in my words any bekios or any idios, he says, Ganav hu iti, I stole it, he says, from the early authorities. I stole it from the Gedolim who lived before me. And therefore he says, somebody who wants to publish a sefer, even if there's only one valuable thing in it, you should let him publish the sefer. He'll be mezakeh the rabbim. Otherwise, what's he going to take with him? So Megadim says, very interesting. He started off as a rebbe for children. He started off as a melamed tinoikos in Lvov, and after his father passed away in 1747, he became the rav in Lemberg, and then here in Frankfurt Ador. So he would write with the utmost humility, and this is one of the reasons that the Megadim was zoicha, that halacha kamaisai. He would write, he was not zoicha loredes lo'imek kavanasai shel hagoyin hanizkar. He would never say, this gadol is wrong. He would never say, I disagree. He would say, I'm not zoicha to plummet the depth of the opinion of this particular gadol. So he says something very interesting. He writes in his Hakdama, Ish ke'erki, somebody like me, somebody in a low madrega, shaloi milesi kreisi v'shasu poiskim. I have not filled myself up with the knowledge of the Torah. He says everything I took with tachbulos from the early authorities, and he says if you see that I have bekiyas and I have knowledge, I took it from the Masaras Hashas, or I took it from other achronim who they really knew a lot of information. He encourages in his Hakdama authors to publish their svarim. He says that a person should try to be madfis their svarim b'chayehem, otherwise their wives are going to throw it out 1 year Erev Pesach. He says, why would you want your Chidushay Torah to go up in the fire on an Erev Pesach with the chametz? Get it out. He says, get it out before it's too late. So then he wrote the Megadim on Yeridea in 1771. That's when it was published. So it's interesting. He writes from the beginning, from Siman Aleph and Hilchos Shchita until Siman Kuf Yud Beis. He wrote a parish on the Taz, Mishpat Zav, and a parish on the Shach, Sifsei Das. Then, 16 years later, Tav Kuf Mem Zayin, he publishes on Archaim. Again on the Taz Mishpat Zav, and on the Magen Avram, who is in Kalish, and Be'ez Hashem, when you join us for the next trip, hopefully we'll get there, he publishes the Eish Shel Avram. It's interesting, he also wrote a Sefer Ginas V'Radim. He wrote something called Tevas Goyme. He wrote Peiras Yosef on Yavamas and Ksubas. He wrote Rosh Yosef on Masechta Shabbos. So I'll just tell you two little things I saw in the Hakdama of the Pri Megadim. Stam Kedai to take with you. You know, this that they say, that there's a haftacha, that if somebody says the Shira Az Yashir, Besimcha, Moichlin Loi Kol Havaynosav, it's found in the Hakdama of the Pri Megadim on Orach Chaim. He also says a very beautiful yediyah. We know that how many mitzvahs tamidiyos are there? How many mitzvahs are there that the person can be mekayim at all times? There are no situations, there are no instances, there are no circumstances that make us not able to fulfill these mitzvahs. The 6 mitzvahs tamidiyos, 6 mitzvahs, right? You have Metzius Hashem, that there's Rebbeinu Shem, there's no other God. Hashem has no other parts. It's a mitzvah to love Hashem, it's a mitzvah to fear Hashem, not to turn after your heart and not to turn after your eyes. The Sefer HaChinuch writes, the remez to the 6 constant mitzvahs is Sheish Arei Miklat Tihiyana. So I just saw this week, Pri Megadim explains why are the 6 mitzvahs tamidiyos compared to the Arei Miklat. He says the same way if somebody kills b'shoigeg. So if you're in the Arei Miklat, you're safe. The moment you step out, you're endangering yourself. So too these 6 mitzvahs. As long as a person's mind is focused on these mitzvahs, he's secure, he's safe, he's protected. But don't venture out. Don't say, you know what, not right now, I have other... As long as you're mizdabek to these mitzvahs, they're an Arei Miklat for a person. So I want to tell you one beautiful chiddush from the Pri Megadim. Mamish Oyim and Oira. Agadata. There's one shtickle Agadata, because the Pri Megadim wrote very cryptically and very halachically. Pri Megadim writes that the Ramah tells us, the night of the Seder, you put a beya, you have an egg. Why do you have an egg? So the Ramah writes, first of all, Zeicher to the Churban, we don't have a Karban Pesach anymore, so it's a time of Avelos. But the Ramah also writes, the reason why we have an egg is because the night of Pesach is the same night of the year as Tisha B'Av. But then the Pri Megadim says another pshat. He says, because we know that when was Yaakov Avinu cooking the beans for the Avelos of Avraham Avinu, Erev Pesach. So we have the egg, Leil Seder, for the Avelos of Avraham Avinu. So then he says, Ayin b'Sefer Yad Yosef. He says it comes out then that the Gemara says in Baba Basra, Esav was over 5 Averos that day. One of them was what? Ba al Nara Hamurasa. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says he was kofer b'tchias hamisim. The Gemara says he was kofer be'ikr. The Gemara says he was haragas hanefesh. The Gemara says he was violated 5 Averos. Where do we see he was ba al Nara Hamurasa? Yaakov gave him what? Beans. And Yaakov gave him lechem. What kind of lechem? Matzah. Yaakov told him, here's the matzah, but you're not allowed to eat it yet, because you're not allowed to eat matzah Erev Pesach. But what happens when you eat matzah Erev Pesach? What does it say in the Yishalmi? Kol ha'oichel matzah Erev Pesach, ki'ilu ba al arusasoi beveis chamev. So when we say Esav was ba al arusasoi, the pshat is he ate matzah that he was supposed to save until the night, says the Pri Megadim. Randomly, the Teflika Rav, Rabbi Shamshon Polanski, who was the Rebbe of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yosef and Psak, when he became the Rav in a city in Europe, so the first shaila by his hachtara, the way they would be machter the new Rav is they would walk the Rav home from shul Friday night, and he would make kiddush, and that was his hachtara. Yeah. Right after the Teflika Rav made kiddush, a kid comes running into the Beis HaMedrash and says, my mother just had a baby boy, and the shaila is, should we make the Shalom Zachar tonight or next Friday night? And now the Teflika, now the Rav's really on the spot, because this is like a random shaila. How would anybody know what the halacha is about this? And the Teflika Rav, before he became the Rav, it was a week before Pesach, and he decided he's going to review all the Pri Megadims on Hilchos Pesach, and randomly in the Pri Megadim on Hilchos Pesach, Pri Megadim writes that if a baby is born on Friday night, the Shalom Zachar is the first Friday night. We'd rather do it the second Friday night. But the Pri Megadim writes, you do it the first. And the city was Nishtoimim. How could anybody possibly know? And to not be familiar with the random Pri Megadim and Hilchos Pesach. And that's how he solidified his position as Rav. So this is a few of the ideas from the Pri Megadim. Chusa Yogen Aleinu. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.